Hi everyone, I'm Allie. Join me in creating these 3-drop brick stitch fringe earrings, the feather dusters. You can see how you can do them different with the fringe in different designs, different color ideas, and I'm going to explain to you why you would want to do a multi-drop brick stitch versus one bead at a time to get a different size of a triangle. So go ahead and gather up your materials. If you need any materials, they're listed right below the video, but some 11O seed beads will do just fine. So we're going to be using brick stitch and then some fringe in whatever pattern you want. And we'll go over kind of how you get the design ideas and how you get the patterns and kind of that drastic flow. But the reason that we are doing a 3-drop, so you'll see how that varies, versus a 1-drop like this is because of the shape of the triangle. So when you get a 1-drop brick stitch, you are getting a triangle that is the same on each side. Lengthwise, same here, same along the top. When you start to increase and do a 2-drop or a 3-drop triangle, you start to get more of an isosceles triangle. So this one here, you can see it a little bit better, starting right there at the bottom. That's your 3-drop triangle when it is 10 lines long. Notice how the sides of the triangle, the height is going to be a lot higher than, or a lot taller or a lot longer than the bottom. So you're getting that isosceles triangle where you're getting a longer, more kind of dramatic effect. So that's why would you do 1-drop versus 3 to get more of that dramatic effect? So to begin, we have some dragon thread. Now, if you like a stiffer top, I would recommend using a size 8 dragon thread. And then for the fringe, we can switch to a size 5. Nothing says you have to use the exact same thread for both pieces. If you want to, more than welcome to. I'm actually using the size 5. One thing that sometimes will throw people off is a little bit of tension with the size 5, that it's a little bit harder for some people to hold. We're going to begin with 3 different colors of our 11O seed beads, and I'm using 3 Miyuki colors, a khaki, a eucalyptus, and a turquoise green. I have 11Os in the toe hose, and I'm going to use them for fringe at the bottom. I'm not using them with the Miyuki. I'm just using them stacked at the bottom because they do slightly differ in size. I could do them all with Toho and that would stack up nicely in size, but the Toho is going to be a little bit too big to put with the Miyuki brand for the brick stitch to get the effect that I want. To begin, we're going to start out with some ladder stitch. So I have a stop bead on my thread and a size 11 needle, and I'm going to add to it 3 seed beads in 2 groups. So I'm going to think of this as 1 bead and 2 bead, even though they're groups of 3. So I've got my 2 rows on, and I'm going to sew back up through my first 3 beads. 1, 2, 3 beads and out. Pull nice and tight, and then we're going to sew down through the second set of 3 beads. And what that's going to do is get those first beads to sit nice and tight next to one another. From here, I'm going to add my 3rd row, which again, I'm doing 3 beads at a time because I'm doing 3-drop. So I'm adding 3 beads. My thread's currently coming out the bottom. I'm going to go into the top of that 2nd row. The 3rd row is going to lay down right next to, and to get it to sit nicely, we're going to sew back up through that 3rd row and get prepared and ready to add our 4th row. The 4th row, I'm going to change over to that moody blue color, which is the eucalyptus. Once again, my row is going to consist of not just 1 bead, but 3. Threads coming out the top this time, I'm going to sew into the bottom and then back through the beads I just added. I'm going to continue doing this ladder stitch to get the baseline with 2 more rows of the moody blue and then 3 rows of the turquoise, so I have 9 in total, 3 of each color. Once you have your ladder stitch completed, it's time to move on to brick stitch. To start a row of brick stitch, we're going to be starting out with 2 rows wide. So we're going to start out with 2 groups of 3 beads. I'm going to start to get this nice diagonal appearance with, over the turquoise, 3 beads in turquoise to be row number 1 and 3 beads to be my 2nd row. I'm going to skip over that first bridge thread, or the thread that connects one line of my ladder stitch to the other, and sew over to the 2nd row. I'm tucking my thread and needle underneath the thread to hold it in place. Most other stitches you're sewing into beads. With the ladder or with the brick stitch, you're sewing and connecting on actually to the thread. So you're sewing underneath what we call that bridge thread. And you'll notice I'm adding 2 rows at once always as I start a new, or 2 columns once as I start a new row. From here, I'm going to sew back up through beads 1, 2, and 3. If the beads fall off, it just means your thread came out from underneath that bridge thread. And I'm also, to get that to sit correctly, going to sew down through the first 3 beads. This is the way. You don't have to do this, but we are going to do it. So underneath that bridge thread, we're going to sew back up through those original 3 beads. The reason we're adding 2 beads or 2 columns at once is so we don't see any thread on the exterior. And now we're going to redo the exact same thing that we just did, getting our second row, so our thread's coming out the top, going through row number 2, sewing underneath the bridge thread, and then back up. I'll do this once again as we do the next row so we can reinforce that. From here, it's pretty simple. We're going to do 3 rows of each color. Until we get to the end, we're only going to have 2 of our khaki color. This time I have my 3 beads on for my next column. I sew underneath that bridge thread from the back to the front, and then I sew, back up through those 3 beads. Pull them tight, switch on to my next color. 3 beads go on, so underneath that next bridge thread, and then back up through those beads. We can also get this same effect if you want to with some bugle beads for more of that long isosceles triangle. I'm going to continue adding on my rows, going through here, underneath the bridge thread, sew back up through the beads, get ready to add that next line. Again, a 3rd line of eucalyptus, and then I'm going to run out of bridge threads here, and we're starting that triangle look, so I'm going to only have 2 of the khaki in the next line. So naturally, as you do brick stitch, each time you do the next row, the column count is going to decrease. So at first we did 9 of our columns. Next in row 2, we only have 8 of our columns. Next is 7, 6, and so forth. You can tell that I was 1 more short because I'm using the bridge threads. So every time you do another row, you are going to get 1 column less of beads. Starting off again, I'm going to flip this in my hand because I like to sew from my right to my left. And I'm going to add 1 grouping of my khaki here because I know I'm decreasing. I'm going to add 1 of my khaki, and then in my next one is going to be that moody blue color to get that diagonal look. Skipping over bridge thread number 1, I'm going to go underneath and sew down bridge thread number 2. So underneath and between that thread. Sew back up through that grouping here of the eucalyptus beads, back up through group number 2. Now to get number 1 to stay in place, we're going to sew down through number 1. We're going to sew underneath the bridge thread. We're going to sew back up through that first row or the first column of beads. And now we have to get out, so our thread's coming out that second row so we can add our 3rd. So I'm going to sign down number 2, so column number 2, I'm sewing down, grabbing onto the bridge thread right underneath, and then once again, you can see I'm kind of turning from one side to the other, back up those 3 beads. My thread and needle now will be coming right out the top, and once again, I'm going to go back in and start adding 3 of our columns of each color. So 2 more columns of our blue, and 3 columns of that turquoise green. So you can see the progression as you build. You can keep in mind if you're thinking, what do I add? Which color do I add? You're always going to be maintaining those 3 rows if you're doing this diagonal line of whatever your ending color was from row number 1. So I'm always doing those 3 lines of that turquoise green color as I go down. When you come out the top, you are down to 2 rows. So coming out the top here, I was going back and reinforcing, and you're going to be adding your wire guard. I would always suggest a wire guard. They just give a nice, really polished, finished look. You can also use a soldered ring if you want to, but this attaches really, really well to the ear wire, whether or not you're using a regular French hook or you're using a lever back or a post. So right here, I have my thread going through that U channel of the wire guard. I'm coming out my row number 1. So I added my rows, went down row number 2, came out the top, went back down number 1 to kind of lock it in place. And then instead of coming back down number 2 right away and going back up, I just went right into the wire guard, and now I'm going to go back down row number 2. Anytime you're using a wire guard, any clasp, you always want to make sure that you're getting a second strand of thread through there. So I'm going to go back up through and then up through the line here of my wire guard and then down through the other side and down through the other row of beads. And there I have those. What I'm going to do now is zigzag through my piece. Rather than just going straight down the line on the end, I'm going to zigzag through to get to the bottom to start my fringe. And I'm going to start my fringe on my brown side. So zigzagging through, I'm just going to go through one line here, the next row down. Then I'm going to go through another row down and then come out to the side. So you're just running your thread line the whole way through. If you want to switch thread, say you use the 6 or the 8 higher up here and you want the 5 so you get that nice flowy fringe, you can tie off your thread here. And then also you could just have your own little triangle if you just want a triangle without fringe. The options really are endless. The wider you go, kind of the taller the triangle is going to get naturally. And then as you're here at the end, you want to come out the end in order to go in and have your fringe ready to go. So I'm going to go over here, out through my final line, move over that stop bead, and then I'm going to take off the stop bead. Taking off the stop bead will allow me just to tie off that thread end, and then I don't have to work around it. I'm going to do this sample piece and this second earring in a cascading line. This sample piece here, I started decreasing the amount of beads once I got to the center of that row. So this one here has 10 rows. Once I got to number 5, number 4, I started to decrease that fringe. This one here, I kept increasing as we go down. So we're going to keep increasing and get that water flow effect. Coming out that final row, I'm going to add 12 to start out, and this can be short, long, up to how long you want those feather dusters to be. And I'm going to go in here and I'm going to do 12 of my first color. And the color that I'm picking is going to go in line with the color that my thread is coming out of. We're going to go in between those 3 bead high brick stitch or the ladder stitch as we go. So I have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. From here, I'm going to do a rotation of beads. That's going to be one of my silver, one of my khaki, one eucalyptus, one turquoise, and then I'm going to start with one silver and a 2mm crystal in a vintage rose color, just a little bit to catch the light, capped off by one of my silver beads. Take your thread and needle back up through that whole row of fringe, skipping over the 11-0 seed bead that I added at the end, which is going to work as an anchor to hold that fringe in place. Going back up through, I'm going to go up through 3 beads right there. Make sure I have a lot of thread or no thread showing, and then I'm going to come down my next row of 3. This time I'm going to increase my count. So my count's going to increase, if you can see, 1 bead on the fringe row. So we're going to go from 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So that way. And then I'm also going to increase one of my silver beads here at the bottom. You can see here I've increased by 2 beads each time I went in 2 rotations to get that nice kind of V and had that a little bit more dramatic. If I wanted the colors here more dramatic, I would group them up as well too. So I'd start increasing 2 khaki, then 2 of my eucalyptus and start on that rotation also. Coming down here, 12 was my count, 13 is going to be my next count, and then 1 silver, my 3 colors in a row, and then 2 silvers. Then the next row is going to be 14, 14, and then my 1 silver, my 1 khaki, my 1 blue, my turquoise, and then 3. So you're just building these up as you go, connecting to the rows. Once you're done, you come back up through that ladder, down through the next, and add your next row of fringe. Once you get done your long rows of fringe, your thread and needle are going to be coming out the top of that 3 grouping of your ladder stitch. And what I'm going to do is get my thread back to the thread that's still remaining. So that may be your starter thread, or if you're like me and had to add some thread, I did so in the project and just tied that regular knot. I'm going to take my thread and needle and literally just go up and down, just those 3 beads in that ladder stitch till I get the thread ends together. And then because I'm using the size 5 and I have some nice natural colors, you're really not even going to see that knot together So I'm just literally going up and down the ladder stitch. I'm going to tie off my thread ends. I'm going to add my ear wire and then be able to wear my 3-drop brick stitch feather duster earrings. So here I am getting back to that starting position. You can sew further up in the project if you want to, but I'm just going to take those 2 thread ends, tie a regular knot, sewer's knot, right over left and then left over right, nice and close down. If you want to, then the one that's still attached to your needle, you can sew further in the project so that way your thread ends are not ending in the exact same spot. So I'm going to take this one now and sew up through the next 3 beads. So that way my thread is ending in different spots in different directions while trying to not get the thread all tangled into your fringe. And I'm going to go in now with my thread zap or my thread burner, burn off that thread, and the last thing to do is just to put on your ear wire. Thanks so much for joining me in these 3-drop feather duster earrings. You can see I've put them onto the ear wire so they face in opposite directions, so that way they go in the same angle. If you're doing something that is angled, you want them to frame the face angle out and put them so they're facing that way. Remember, if you do need any seed beads, crystals, or materials, look below the video in the description. We put links there to shop with us online, as well as if you follow that link to the details, you'll get extra tutorials that may be helpful to watch in addition to this video. Remember, if you haven't yet, subscribe so you don't miss anything from us here at Potomac Beads. Thanks so much for watching and stay tuned for our next inspirational video.